Hey, today on the 167, I'm joined by Pastor Jake and Pastor Cam. We hear a 7-minute story and we take a question out of the mailbag. Welcome to the 167. Hey, welcome back to the 167. I am here with Pastor Jake Reeves.
Hi, hello.
And Pastor Cameron Lazier.
What up?
And we are here today. Pastor Rick is on vacation, so he's in sunny Florida.
Nice.
Cue some nice Floridian music.
I don't know.
That's
Is
just
that Jimmy
like Georgia,
Buffett?
Florida line.
Depends where he's at. Oh man,
You're the resident Florida expert. What's the Florida?
It
is
depends what
native
part of Florida you're going to.
Yeah.
So today we are going to discuss Pastor Rick's message while he's away. So
Ooh,
Nice.
We could all get fired by the end of this.
Oh,
so if you don't see us next week, let it be known what's happened. So let's start off. I mean, let's just talk about, for one, like how great Pastor Rick did.
He did a great job.
really good.
He's
So he
fantastic.
did.
Like, I enjoyed his outfit. You know, everything about it.
he should have popped his collar. No, I'm kidding.
His demeanor was excellent. You know, stage presence. You know, life changing.
Please don't fire me.
He was also very energetic if you're in the second service because the coffee that he had.
That is
So-
true.
yeah.
He was jacked.
Yeah.
on
Oh my
caffeine.
God.
Somebody brought Pastor Rick an extra cup of coffee, and so he was.
So yeah, if
all over the
if you're a 10 a.m.er or an 11:30, you could come at 8:30, give him some caffeine, and it ensures that your service is going to be like off the chain.
Do we need to start like a new thing where it's like if you bring Pastor Rick a 5-hour energy,
Oh, goodness.
or like we'll put him on something different every time.
Oh,
Monster.
man.
It's like a control
Bang.
8:30 is the control group, and then 10 a.m.
We'll see how it goes.
It's going down.
Oh,
All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about. We started a new series called "I Love My Church."
Yeah.
And really, we're talking about the church in general. We're talking about New Life Community Church. And so we're starting this series just talking about what it is to be a good, healthy church. So I just wanted to start asking, what were the things that first drew you to New Life? So at one point, like none of us really grew up in this church. There was a point where we were interviewing in that process. But most of us, you know, we came and we saw a service. We were checking that out. What first kind of drew you to New Life? What were the things that stood out to you?
Are we going like
Alphabetical order.
seniority or
the youngest one.
I mean,
person
we've
who
all
don't
got-
stop the least.
Cam, you're the newest.
Yeah, Cam.
Oh,
Why don't you go,
gosh.
man?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Why not? Well, I think the main thing that really drew me to New Life was the potential, and seeing what God was already doing at New Life, and seeing the stories already in that interview process, and kind of even doing my research about it, and knowing like, hey, God has bigger and better things for New Life, and God's going to really use New Life in the area, in the community, to do bigger and better things. So like the potential, just the hand of God, that, you know, the hand of favor that God has on us at New Life. Like, I think that's amazing, that God's just really moving through our community. God's really moving through our church, through our people. And so just being a part of that was like, oh, I want to be a part of that. Like, and I even say this, like, even if I wasn't on staff, like I would attend New Life if I was in the area, like coming from, obviously I came from Missouri, so that'd be a long drive. But if I was in the area,
You drive from
I
Lee
would drive
Summit
from
all the
Lee
way down to
Summit
Garden.
New Life.
But would you drive from Florida?
Oh,
No.
no, we're not. It's a far drive. Oh,
Cam's
wow.
mom, if you would like to go ahead and
Mom, please check out this podcast and
Move up
Drive
here.
up.
You know, if you want mom to move up here, you got to get some grandbabies going. That's
oh,
that's
now
the
it's
way
been
that goes.
recorded.
in case you don't listen.
Casey, if you're listening, no pressure.
No problem.
Oh man.
What about you, Pastor Jake?
Yeah. Like, so, it was people for me. Like, I know when I was, I'll try to keep my story as short as I can because it involved a lot of different things. But when I turned in an application to New Life, I wasn't even really thinking I was going to go into full-time ministry. Like I was thinking that was going to come like another decade later in my life, but I was like, I want to practice. I'm going to send this in. And then before you knew it, it just kind of kept rolling and rolling. But I remember looking at our New Life's like Facebook and online presence, and I'm like, oh no, it's like they got to be in the 90s or something.
That was when we were still using like a WordPress document for.
And so, you know, like God bless the people that did it, but it was definitely, it was definitely the thing. Like I was like, I don't know. And so then we rolled up to the church as the process got going, and Sarah and I both were like, we're gonna walk in there and we're gonna know right away that we can just like say no thanks. We rolled in, you know, Pastor Lucas was standing there. You might have been you were in a stylish jacket of some type. I don't know.
Cardigan?
That's very possible.
It was
fall.
late. It was late October, and
yes.
And I was like, all right, this guy's all right. And then we sat through the message, and Pastor Rick preached just so conformed to the word that it was refreshing for us. And during the handshake time, Tony Huffman, shout out, bro, turned around and invited me to men's group. And I'm like, because that was the other thing. I grew up in small churches. I served in church plants. I was not a huge fan of larger churches. And I'm like, oh, this church has some heart. It has people that are dedicated to the other people around it. And so
That Tony Huffman, he's quite the inviter. He's quite the people person.
He is, man. And so, you know, he probably should have gotten someone like my signing bonus. You guys got signing bonuses, right?
Hey, what about then we took
got
you
a jersey.
to lunch at your favorite of favorites is
gosh.
Mexican food. I didn't know you
I
didn't
know.
like Mexican
It's
food.
fine. I've grown to love Mexican. I've grown to enjoy Mexican. I'm not going to say
To
love.
respect
Was
it.
it me, Ranchito?
No, it was not me, Ranchito. Pastor Cam just got
Shout out, me,
destroyed by
Ranchito.
Man.
in the last
We're not
24
gonna
hours.
Well, if you don't eat like a whole liter of the corn masa, you know.
Hey,
like-
it's a bad decision.
So that connect. How about you, Pastor Lucas?
So at the time, we were actually being very choosy about. We had just left a different church. I was pastor on that staff, and we were looking for where we were going to raise our kids for the next 10 years, and we were very specific about that. And so we really liked it because in the Christian church, a lot of times I don't feel like I have a home because, like we've talked about this before, where I describe myself as Charis Baptist.
Yeah.
Like, I really like being in the Word. I take it very seriously, but I also, you know, want a church that we're moving in the Holy Spirit. And so showed up. We came to the night service actually, at 6 p.m. nights, and right away felt really good about it because it was a place where people were actively praying for you. They were believing that in mind renewal throughout the week. But again, Pastor Rick was very, you know, preach the scriptures. That's
Yeah.
what we're going to do. And then the other things that really made a difference to us is that at the time we were fostering and then we were pregnant, and so we had. We were a foster adoptive family. Our older two kids that we got through foster care are multiracial, so we were looking for that. You know, we were looking for a church where they weren't going to stick out and they'd be like, oh, they're the only kids that are in foster care are adoptive. They're the only kids that are multiracial. And so it's like right away we met a ton of families who were also foster adoptive, families that were multiracial. And so it was like, it really felt like home. So the other thing I had here was there a time when church was a have to, and what moved you to I get to go to church?
100%.
Oh man, we all grew up in church, right? I'm pretty sure.
yeah.
I think all of us.
Mm.
Yeah, pastor's kid, grew up in church.
Not pastor's kid.
Your mom
was like-
dragging you to church.
But,
I was like deacon's
100%.
kid.
Oh.
Like
Yeah, so like for me, and that's a lot of my story was, you know, raised up. It was black church, so it's long. Number one, so
yeah.
like I'm like
They don't have an end time.
oh no end time. So I'm like, what? I'm taking a nap, and there's still I wake up, the sermon's still going on. There's still worship. I'm like, what's going on? So I just remember there was times as I grew up that I would wake up, and if I didn't hear the radio play, that means we were going to church. But the moment I heard the radio pop on, I'm like, yeah, we're going to church, and I'm gonna hate this because it's gonna be so long. And so it was pretty much like I have to most of my childhood, and it wasn't until like I was in middle school where I went to my first non-black church, African American church, to be honest with you. And shout out Bell's Hills Baptist Church, but that was the first time I went there, and it was an hour service, and I got home, and I'm like, oh, I have the rest of my day. I can do whatever I like. This is so cool. And honestly, going to that church, going to some other churches as well, being plugged into the church I was ultimately I ultimately grew up in, it was the relationships and the people that made it to be like, hey, I want to go to this. I want to, like the friends that I have, the mentors that I have, the men that poured and invested into me, they made church be like, hey, I want to come because I want to talk to these people. I want to hang out with them. I want to spend time with them. I want to kind of just be mentored by them. That really helped. And so that's what changed church from I have to a want to.
That's what I was going to ask you, because the minute you said relationship, I was like, well, relationships with other peers or relationships with mentors, and you mentioned both those things. I think having both those, like, it'll last for a little while. They're just like, oh, my friends go here. But if that's it, I think a lot of times people fall away because it's just like you really want somebody who's been through the struggles that you have and that can pour into you and walk you through that. Mm-hmm. What about you?
I grew up old school American Baptist. When everyone was buying brand new 1990s like synth keyboards, we were doubling down and buying a brand new organ for our church.
Nice.
So, and but
did it have the pipes built into the wall?
I think we did have some pipes behind our choir thing, but they were hidden. So, but I think later it just got plugged in. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I was a kid, so. But it was definitely a have to go for a long time, just because it was part of our culture. It's what we did, when there was Sunday night church, and I'm trying to remember if we ever had a Wednesday night.
Wait, did you have Sunday night church? Like we had Sunday night church, which was you come and everybody's like, "What hymn do you want to sing?"
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was
like hymn 643. Everybody turn there.
a worship pastor's nightmare now, where I'm like, people are like, just do this song.
And you're like,
No, wait, 100%. I think you need to do one of the worship nights that we do here at the end of the month.
Oh my goodness.
And just publish the whole
everything
list
we have
of
man.
These are the songs that are in regular rotation, and then just like let people call it out. Be like, what a beautiful name, what a beautiful name, and then like mid song they could call it out, and you have to shift.
Someone's gonna hit me up on Sunday and be like, that was the best idea you guys have ever had.
Ours was like we did that, and then like the fifth Sunday was like, because no one does fifth Sundays, it's like fifth Sunday sing, so it was like a talent show.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of cool. Like people come up and you're like ukulele and like these random.
Cam, you're pitching ideas now.
See, like we could just do it digitally. That way, there's just a little like a Twitter feed up there. So like you'd be like, what a beautiful name, and it's like pop, 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 and you're like, oh, that one, and then just go into the
nice. And so for the longest time, it wasn't. I kind of I had a little bit of my own awakening. My senior year, I started to really love it and see the value in the relationships that I kind of took for granted, most of it. But then I kind of just dived. I went to Christian college, like I think all of us did. Yep. And chapel sort of sucked my soul a little bit. Yeah. Like,
Mom was nice.
I was like, you went to SEU, man. Like I went, I went to a free Methodist school. Like I went Baptist, free Methodist, and so I kind of, again, it was a have to thing. And it wasn't really till I got out and I kind of stopped being plugged into a church that I realized how much that was a part of my life and I needed it. And so then I got plugged in with a really old school or Presbyterian church, and I helped with their youth group, and I loved every minute of it.
That's cool.
Not necessarily like the hymns and stuff; they were probably more old school than the Baptist, but it definitely it was a cool transition. And ever since I've enjoyed it.
Mine was similar in that same sense, where it was like it's serving. I think that kept me connected. Mm-hmm. Because I've told you guys this story before, but I got kicked out of Sunday school when I was in like 5th, 6th grade. So it was like, which I was just kind of a smart aleck, and I was the pastor's kid. And one of the guys that was teaching Sunday school was teaching stuff I didn't think was biblical as a 5th grader. And so like he, made this thing. He's like, well, if you think it's so easy, you teach the class. I was like, sure. And I came the next week with like a 3-point lesson. I wore a suit, like taught and everybody's just like, oh man, this is great. And then he was like, get out. And so like I went to my dad and I was like, I got kicked out of Sunday school. And so there's a guy in my church that he was the volunteer youth pastor. So like we couldn't afford a regular pastor. And so, but this guy, he went to concerts with us. He took us to, festivals and all this kind of stuff. Like he was really good. And he's like, you need to be serving. And so he stuck me and I started serving in the 3 to 5 year olds class. And so he goes, if you think you want to teach Sunday school, fine. And so he stuck me down there volunteering. And pretty soon I was running the class by myself. Like there was no adult, which I'm pretty sure now you get you in huge legal trouble. Yep. But like that hooked me on serving. And so like I said, through college, we had a student run chapel like every once in a while. And that was great.
Yeah. The student run stuff was always better. It was,
but you're required to come on Tuesday and Thursday mornings was it was. I don't
Did you
know.
have like a convocation?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Once, yeah, that was like.
It's like everybody wears their robes and
Yeah.
stuff. So I was like mostly doing my Greek homework during chapel.
It was like a whole thing where the entire basketball team would sit together and sleep through it. And
Oh yeah, my dorm
know,
sat
it
together
was-
through that, but it was so like it was all right. And like I said, on the weekends, then you're going, well, I don't need to go to church because I already went to chapel. But it was like
Yeah.
so there's 2 Christian churches in town, and I started at first bouncing forward. I was like, well, I like this speaker or I like this worship, and then I got tied in serving in the junior high youth group at one of the churches at Jeff Street, and so then that's where I attended, not because I, the preacher was great, but not because I was it was hip or anything like that.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
because
yeah.
that's where I served, and so I've always loved serving in the church. But like I said, New Life is probably one of 3 churches maybe in my whole life that I've actually really enjoyed. Like you said, I would attend it, even if I wasn't serving,
Yep. Even from Florida.
even from Illinois. But like as we're doing that, I mean, New Life is on the move. Like I said, we've talked about where we're going with building stuff, where we're going with the future of the church. So when you guys think about New Life in the future, because that was one of the things you said too, Cam, about potential.
Yeah.
So when you think about the future of New Life, what is one thing that you really want to be locked in with our reputation in the community going forward? Like 10 years from now, what do you want people to say about New Life that you're like, oh yeah, that's got to be part of our rep in the community?
Are we bouncing through? I mean,
Well,
like,
Cam's gone
yeah.
first like
I was
twice.
like,
I think
Cam's
it's
gone
time for
first.
you to go first.
So, man, for me, like knowing that our ministry, like it just spills out from our 4 walls, like where, where it's such a thing that we're the biggest church in Gardner.
Protestant church.
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry, Catholics, you got us there. But we're the biggest church, and people don't know that just because we got a big building or something, but because they see us actively doing whatever it is.
Yeah.
They see our youth engaged at the high school. They see us out praying for people at Price Chopper. Like we are in their face, loving them to death. Loving them out of death. How about that?
Aggressive love.
So, I mean, like I absolutely, our bread and butter is crafting services that the lost can walk into and feel absolutely welcome and be able to understand. And that's not going to change. But man, to have that transform and push outward, I think that's the next thing.
Stole everything I was gonna say. That was pretty much it. Like, I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, I'm not, like, literally that's it. And so I would love for the church to be known outside the 4 walls, like out of our 4 walls. And so, and I love that whole thing of, it's like everyone's heard it, like if the church stopped and like was pulled out of your community, would your community know?
Oh, that's one
Like,
of the best questions.
That's 100%. Like, and I think New Life has that right now, and I think it's like the progression is like even more so. Like if New Life ever just said, "Hey, we're closing down or we're going to another city," like Gardner, the
They'd be
area
like,
around
"No."
us, like, no, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah,
you need to-
CFG would
We
light
need
up.
CFG to light up and be like, no.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
I think
It would for the first 2 comments, and then somebody would troll it, and it would.
That is accurate.
Yep.
They'd be like, never mind. I was going to say, the one
Don't
guy.
get too specific.
I know, there's one guy that's always like, what building is that? And he says it's going to be some unsavory business. And I'm like, they'd be like, that's what's going to happen to it. But I'm not going to quote it.
But also like to even just as a church of going, like there's other churches that are kind of asking us for like some advice. Like
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
resourcing other
Yeah.
churches. I think that's like when we were doing a live stream stuff and started like we had other people come in like,
did.
hey, what are you guys doing? And even for like us having a conference for youth, like I want youth leaders to come in and be like, hey, what are you guys doing in the youth ministry? Like, how can we, like, can you have resources? Can you help us out?
Yep.
And like all the ministries are just resourcing other churches and other ministries to kind of help them out.
Yeah,
I
we're
think
not we're not holding it to ourselves.
Yeah.
We're definitely looking to equip
And that's the thing. A thing I think nobody ever realizes. But like Pastor Rick, like regularly meets with the other pastors here in town
Yeah.
and mentors them and pours into them. And it's like, I know a lot of churches. I've been at churches where they're like, oh well, if you don't go to our church, that's okay. You can go to another church. But really, it's like that church is gonna, and it's this competition vibe. And it's like, like no, Pastor Rick is actually meeting with other pastors and going, how can we help you? How
Yeah.
can we?
and we genuinely like them.
Yeah, and we're like, oh no, FBC is great, and
yeah,
like
Grace and all those people. Yeah.
Now we're gonna have to shout out Grace first.
Oh, the
Restoration.
restoration.
Like,
Everybody.
They forgot us.
If we didn't mean, if we didn't mention you, we love you. But yeah, I think that like when you kind of said that, I think that's one of my big things is pioneering.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that, like we do take some risks here, and like I would love to see us be the church that's what we're known for, is that we're pioneering new things.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, if you look at churches in Gardner, we were the first to basically, like the first week we were Facebooking live, and then it just kind of moved from there.
Yeah.
The
phone sitting up there, and oh yeah, because I was at Comcito. And,
like we were like, what do we do? And Pastor Rick was like, go get a Surface, and like I think I got my Surface and live streamed it.
How far we've come.
Yeah, but I mean, like I love that about us, that we flex and we move and we do those things. So I think that's great, and I think that more than anything, I want our reputation to be in the community that we are accessible to you.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in your spiritual walk. If you have been a Christian for 15 years, we're going to challenge you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't even know who Jesus Christ is, that's totally fine. You can come in and we're
going to meet you there. And,
we'll work with you. And you're not going to feel out of place. You're not going to feel like somebody's judging your life or.
This is nothing like church-wise, but I think one of the coolest cultures I ever encountered was some of our friends opened up a coffee shop in Manhattan, Kansas, which is college town, and college towns typically have pretty trendy coffee shops, and theirs was trendy, but they made their staff culture where you were supposed to treat everyone like they knew nothing about coffee, like in a very kind way. So you could walk in and be like, "What's a pour over?" And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, let me." And like it was really nice because you encounter so many of those coffee shops where it's like, "What do you mean you don't know?" And
this guy doesn't know what a pour over is.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking like to create that environment in the church world is like a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
I'm just picturing them going down. It's like, I got a pour over for doesn't know what he's talking about. Like calling your name that way. That would be 100% my drink every time.
Yeah.
I go in and I'm like, I'd like some coffee.
The worst ever. Yeah.
So today is kind of fun. We got our first ever mailbag question.
Ooh, did they send it in the physical mail?
No.
I know.
Oh, man.
I know.
We do not physically have a mailbag that we're going to like dump out on the table.
You should.
If you can send us enough letters to do that, we will make a special podcast episode just
Please.
for that.
It's going to be like, we just turn the bag over, my phone falls out of it, and be like, I got an email. But if you would like to send us a question, you can email us, Lucas, Lucas, at newlifegardner.com. And so the mailbag question that came in this week was, lots of pastors talk about Acts 2, the Acts 2 church model. How is the modern church, the attractional church model, like the Acts church, and how is it different?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, first I would hope that both are dependent upon the Holy Spirit. So both existed and were able to begin spreading because of the presence of the Holy Spirit. And then, which I can at least throw in first on the thing that we share with them, is our goal is to spread the gospel.
Oh man, the first time you said the word spread, I was like, I feel like that's a dirty word now because we always talk about spread COVID. I was like, don't ever say spread again. And then you just went, we want to spread the gospel. I was like, oh man.
We want soil that is moist.
Oh, no.
I hope that wasn't terrible for everyone at home. So
this has been the 160s. No, I do. I think so. We're spreading the gospel. So
okay. So yeah, I'll start there.
We're multiplying, pushing the gospel. What do you think, Cam? What are some of the ways that it's different, and what are the ways that it's the same?
Well, I think, and this can, I like the fact that even the new models now going like, hey, we're gonna meet these like the home group model, like everyone's meeting outside in homes, and they're kind of and even thinking about how attractional that is of going, that's an easy evangelical, like, hey, I have a life group or a home group that's happening in my house. Like, do you want to come and be a part of that? And then it's like, people are like, yeah, sure, I'll come to your house. Like, we can talk about the Bible, we can talk about Jesus, we can talk about what we learned.
Talk about spiritual things.
Yeah.
And then that goes into like, hey, you want to come to me at church on Sundays? And like, oh yeah, sure, because they've known the people, they've built the relationships, and that kind of, in sense, helps grows the church. And so like, I think, like for me, I just love that home. It's versus the, hey, do you want to come to me? And it's not really a dig, but like the whole Sunday school, like we're gonna meet in these buildings within the church, like that.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's less like outreach reaching out.
It's harder
invite.
to get somebody to come with you than for you to go to them.
That threshold just got higher for them to break through.
And so it's like, hey, come to my house. We're gonna break some bread. We're gonna eat. We're gonna hang out, chat, fellowship, talk spiritual stuff. Like I think.
Well, that's the thing that I think nobody really talks about when, like I said, I know lots of pastors that are like, oh, we went to the X2 church, and I'm like, most of that's life groups, but like, that's the thing where it's like you can have both. I think where it's like, okay, you can have that in-home, that group that's meeting, that's praying for each other, and like when it talks about selling property, meet each other's needs.
Yeah.
Like most of that stuff was happening at home, but then it said that they would then go to synagogue.
Yeah.
Because it was like at the time most new Christians were Jewish at the time until they really opened it up to the Gentiles, and so you actually had this spread of like gospel-driven churches that are basically in homes, and then on the weekend they would go to a gathering, like a bigger gathering and worship God kind of corporately and do that kind of stuff. And so then that later on, it evolves, later on in the New Testament, but like right away I'm going, especially Acts 2, I mean, it's right off the bat. It's like people are still Jewish, like they were still going to synagogue, they were still going to do these things and worship God. And then when they were at home, they were breaking bread together. So it's really this, I love the idea of hospitality. It's like just being hospitable to your neighbors, being hospitable to people who are far from Christ, and people who are in Christ, just, hey, come over to our house, let's talk about spiritual things, that kind of stuff. But I still think that leaves a lot of room for us on the weekends to come in and do training. I mean, that's basically what we do on the weekends. It's a time for you to corporately worship God, and then to receive some kind of training, to receive a word, those kind of things.
Because it's supposed to trickle back out into life groups.
Yeah.
So plug, if you're watching this or listening and you're not in a life group, why?
Go to newlifegardener.com, click on life groups, or open up your app, go to the More tab, click on life groups. They are recruiting right now.
Exactly. And because that's,
They should be bike pedals. It should be you push one and it spins the other one around.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
I stole that from Dave Ferguson about something. I think it's about discipleship. So credit where credit's due. But I do love that thing where I think there are so many things like that where it's like you push on the weekend service and people come in because they're like, what's going on in here? It looks kind of cool. And then you go, hey, you need to get in a life group. Or you have people that join life groups and they come back to the weekend experience. Yeah. And it should propel each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need both. And it's using that same analogy. It's like, have you ever biked using one pedal? It's kind of fun. Like, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Oh, gosh.
Well, I think
you better be going downhill.
Oh, yeah.
I think that COVID showed us it's hard to worship in your living room by yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also hard to be known in a large church.
It is. Yeah. You have to have both.
Yeah. We're running out of time. But I'll tell you what, we're going to do a 7-minute story here. So hang in there, 167. We'll see you next week back here on the podcast. Gentlemen, good evening.
It was a pleasure from Florida.
Adios.
From Florida. Hey, welcome back to the 167 and our 7-minute stories where we take somebody from New Life and we let them tell their story for 7 minutes, just 7 minutes of whatever you want to talk about. It could be your whole story. It could be what God's doing in your life recently. And so I want to introduce my friend Jon.
Hello, hello.
So, you got 7 minutes. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to do your whole story. We're just going to do something that God's doing.
I was just going to kind of start from the beginning, childhood, and then kind of go to an inner healing story.
Awesome.
That happened about a year ago.
All right, let's do it.
Yep.
All right, here we go. 7 minutes, go.
All right, so I grew up in the area, went to Gardner-Edgerton High School. Didn't really grow up in the church. We went some when we were young, but then sports kind of took over. And but later on in life, I kind of went to college, dropped out, and I struggled with drug addiction. And I got free of that, and I moved to Texas, where my uncle lives, and moved in with his family, and started going to church every Sunday with them. It was a Southern Baptist church. Started going there. Music was real good, but it was just kind of the basic church. And then I started working for a guy that actually went to the same church. So I was just kind of around it every day. He was a really great guy. I learned a lot from him. Then fast forward a few years and moved back home. And I have a friend that lives in Pratt, Kansas, and his family, met him in college. I go hang out with him all the time. And his family are very strong Christians. And so every time I was there, it was just, we were talking about Jesus. So it was always in my ear when I was there. and he struggled with drug addiction as well, and got free from it, got saved, and so I go there. It was about a year ago, and we there was a Pretty Prairie rodeo. We went Friday night, then Saturday. My buddy, his brothers, and his dad had like just a men's session. So it was like later Saturday afternoon. We're just hanging out, listening to music. One of his brothers tells an amazing story about how Jesus worked in his life. And then it was just like, did anybody get anything from that story? And I rose my hand. So they just kind of talked to me about what I got, started working through it. And basically, I was sexually abused when I was young by a babysitter, probably 6 years old. And I had been holding on to that for a very long time. And it started to become a very unhealthy thing that I would think about. And so they took me through an inner healing session with that and walked me through forgiveness and forgiving her. And
For those people that are listening that they don't understand that term inner healing, it's a little bit, it's like half counseling, half prayer.
Correct.
You're really trying to heal these wounds and lead people to forgiveness.
yes. And it's really great because you get a group of people that are around, and I love these guys, this whole family. I've known them very well, and I love them, and I trust them. So it was just like they would ask questions, and I just, we're breaking it down. And so anyway, we walked through this forgiveness, forgiving the babysitter, and it was extremely powerful. I used to just have evil thoughts about her. She had a family, and I just didn't want them to have anything. And after that, it was just complete freedom. Like I don't, now it's like, if I saw her on Facebook or something, it was like, oh, like I hope that family's doing well. And just after that, we ended up going to the Pretty Prairie again Saturday night. And I mean, the amount of joy that I had, I cried for the first time after 10 years. I had a friend that died in high school, and I kind of like made a vow. I don't ever want to like feel like this or cry like that again. And I didn't for 10 years, but that session I did, and it just released so much. And I went to the Pretty Prairie rodeo after that, and I just danced with anybody I could dance with. I wanted to hug everybody. It was just freedom that I had never felt before, and joy. And then me and my buddy ended up having to go on quarantine for 2 weeks, so we went to their cabin and just like went fishing for 2 weeks. And just every morning we'd get up, we'd read the Bible together, and just talked about it. And it was just starting to sow those seeds. And so really since then, I came back from Pratt, started coming to church here at New Life, and then started meeting people that I already knew, but now meeting them in a Christian way, through Jesus, and gotten a life group that I'm really enjoying. My work's great. I work with another guy that goes to New Life, and we listen to Christian music every day at work, and it's been really good. Now, it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot to work through still, but it was definitely a really great start. So yeah, I don't know.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's just an incredible, transformation. Like you said, it's that start off, but you still got to keep that mind renewal going. Like you said, it's that consistent piece of being in the Word and doing those kind of things.
Yes, correct. And that's, it's definitely ebbed and flowed, but it just keeps coming back. And it's like, I know what I know now. It's just like, just keep coming back, and I learn more and I learn more. And it's been really good. I'm just got in a new life group, and I'm really excited about it, and just where that's going to go and what I'm going to learn from that and the people in that group.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And to the people listening, if you could give them one thing that you kind of learned from your story that you'd be like, man, I want you to do this and have the same joy, same experience. I mean, what would that be for you?
The forgiveness aspect of it, it seemed so minimal, and for me, and kind of just with my buddy and kind of what I've talked to him about, it's such an important first step. And there's so much freedom in it. You know, it's like something happens to you and you're like, why should I forgive them? You know, I don't have to forgive them. And then you don't realize like what that's actually doing to you. And when you finally decide like, okay, I'm going to give it to Jesus and I'm going to forgive him. It's so unbelievably powerful and freeing that it's just so, that's what it is forgiveness. I think in that story is a really good first step for people.
Well, awesome, man. Thanks
Yeah.
for sharing your story. Thanks for being vulnerable in that way.
Yep.
And we just hope that it helps all the listeners out there. And like I said, if you have questions about that, you can always email us here at New Life, and we'll help you find some of that same forgiveness.
Yep.
You have some of that joy.
Yep. Thank you, Lucas.
All right, thanks, John.
Yep.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardner.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.